Best of the day to everyone. And welcome to this introduction to IT security and PCI compliance. Brought to you by your concerned IT security coworkers of the world. You may be wondering why this matters. In this information age, your information is very valuable. To illustrate this point, we will review a few security breach cases from 2013 and 2014, like Home Depot and Target. We will talk about what attackers want and how they get it, the impact of their activities, and then we will discuss what PCI compliance is about. Your first line of defense, with any store you shop in, are the retail IT teams. In addition to technology you would expect from an IT team like payment processing, encryption, network security, computers, and system monitoring. Your average IT team also utilizes processes for change control, data management, computer inventory management, network logging and monitoring, network security management, and the management of network security testing. All of this is based on a combination of industry standard practices, PCI compliance requirements, and of course, common sense. Which brings us to the rest of our agenda. During this series we will go over what you as a retailer and the member of a retail team can do to help. Beginning with what the acceptable use policies should look like. How to classify and protect your data. How to manage and control access to your network. What to do in the event of a security incident. How to manage sensitive computer inventory and media. Some minimum requirements for managing your physical and environmental security, as well as some basic common sense ground rules. On that note, before we begin, the reality with IT security is that this does not apply to just a small group of IT professionals who are trying to protect the world against malicious hackers. IT security applies to all of us who use today's networks at our jobs, our smartphones and computers to access and use the internet, our debit and credit cards to submit payments at store registers or online, or those of us who have provided our personal information to a bank, school, hospital, or government agency. We are all affected. Which is where the following historical examples come into play. If you were in retail at the time, or IT security, during the years 2013 and 2014, the ability of hackers to break into what should have been well-protected institutions was alarming. In 2013 alone, it was one news story after another, with names like Wall Street, Adobe, JP Morgan. And even the technology from Apple and Dell were not safe. Then came 2014, where the biggest story was the Home Depot attack. But it was not the only story. For all intent, 2014 was more the year of the hacker than the horse on the Chinese zodiac. Home Depot, as an example, had 53 million customer credit cards compromised. How? Unfortunately for Home Depot, there were multiple problems. The first being that they were still using Windows XP on their registers, which has holes in it that the hackers, or rather attackers, were able to exploit. The second problem was that the hackers were able to acquire a vendor login, which provided them with inside access to Home Depot's systems. Now, don't presume this was a well-planned out and expertly executed attack, though admittedly it may have been. The third, and real heart of the problem that Home Depot had at the time, was their attitude towards security. Up until the successful attack was discovered, the company view was, we sell hammers. That's an excellent mission statement, but when it comes to protecting customer data, it clearly left Home Depot customers in the cold. Our next example is Target. Tragically, Target did and still does take security very seriously. Roughly 40 million customer credit card accounts were at risk as a result of that attack. Consequently, the sudden availability of millions of credit card accounts on the black market, combined with other factors, had an interesting impact. We'll come back to this too. The theft of the Target customer credit card accounts also included the theft of an additional 70 million personal information records. In this case, the attack was executed through malware that had been installed on Target's POS units. Unfortunately, and to the embarrassment of Target, they ignored alarms from their own system. The monitoring tool they use, FireEye, actually caught the attack. More on this later as well. Target and Home Depot were not alone. Other well-publicized successful attacks were, yes, to everyone's surprise, Homeland Security, the celebrity iCloud app, which was not a surprise, Sony of course, and Microsoft, eBay, the City of New York, JP Morgan Chase, Staples, Neiman Marcus, Michaels, and many others. The hacker objectives in each of those cases, except for the retailers listed, were different than what we will be talking about today. But the techniques and technology are the same. The irony about this is that there was an article in USA Today, January 2014, predicting that attacks would surge. So, what is it that hackers want? Why risk going to jail? If a hacker can get away with it, stolen credit card data, which is a case of identity fraud, can be profitable. At the beginning of 2014, when the credit card accounts from the target attack first went on sale on the black market, the price of a stolen credit card was $44.80. After the compromise, due to a flooded market, the price dropped to $8 per stolen card. The impact in terms of stolen funds for 2014 was $16 billion in the United States alone. And this is only for credit cards. In the case of identity theft, where the attacker acquires names, social security numbers, addresses, phone numbers, and other personal data, they can cause a customer considerably more trouble by opening new utility accounts, new credit card accounts, gain access to medical care and more. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go into greater detail. As for how they do it, what gives hackers the ability to successfully attack and compromise networks? The list you see before you represents only a fraction of the types of attacks and methods available to attackers. Many of these, we are pretty sure most of you have heard of, such as phishing, malware, brute force, denial of service, and spoofing, to name a few. The media has been helpful with popularizing many of the terms, including the word hacker, which is great for raising awareness, but the quality of the information is the reason we have created this security awareness video. As an example, does anyone not associated with information technology know what a repudiation attack means? Cache poisoning, or cross-site request forgery. These are just a few of the many tools available to hackers. The point we are making here is that there is an ongoing race between companies and attackers around the world. The tools available to attackers are growing every day. Fortunately, so are the means of defending ourselves. Failure to counteract what the hackers are doing can, and has, impacted everyone. So, what is the impact to the victims of a successful attack? The answer to that question really depends on how an attacked organization responds. If a security breach is detected immediately and reported right away, it saves everyone a lot of trouble. Retail customers can cancel their cards, and in cases where the cards were not cancelled quickly enough, the banks and affected credit card companies can remove the fraudulent charges. However, what happens when people don't find out for a while? Even after being notified of an attack by the U.S. Department of Justice, one retailer proved reluctant to report the security breach of their network, and the theft of customer and employee information. Clearly, credit scores can be hurt. And debit cards are not necessarily covered, which can, and has, put a significant financial burden on the individual customer. Increased credit card bills due to fraudulent purchases are only the beginning. The time and cost of convincing credit rating bureaus to remove entries that were a result of fraudulent activity, can be, and has been, high for victims of this type of identity fraud. And what about the businesses who have been impacted? The majority of purchases in the United States rely on credit cards. What are the odds that you as an individual consumer will use your credit or debit card to buy merchandise from a store that you know was hacked? The impact on Target in their 2013 fourth quarter was a 46% drop in profits compared to the fourth quarter of the previous year. The cost of recovery for credit card companies was roughly $200 million to reissue 21.8 million cards associated with the Target attack. The recovery cost for Target to switch over to chip and PIN terminals by 2015, from their previous POS terminals, was projected to be about $100 million. By the end of 2014, the real cost incurred across 2013 and 2014 was $252 million. This was offset by insurance proceeds, but only down to $162 million. At the end of the day, this is certainly food for thought, as we consider the trust people place in companies and public institutions with protecting their personal and financial data. Which brings us to PCI, and how PCI compliant retailers are working on avoiding becoming the next Target or Home Depot. PCI is an acronym for Payment Card Industry. This represents a consortium of participating companies that was founded by Visa International, MasterCard Worldwide, American Express, Discover Financial Services and the Japan Credit Bureau. Since the founding of the PCI Security Standards Council, the list of participating organizations has grown dramatically with members from all over the world. The list of participants here is only a small subset. As for PCI compliance itself, this represents a set of security standards that were either developed by the credit card industry or adopted. Many of the adopted standards that are required to meet PCI compliance have come from organizations like the SENS Institute, OWASP, otherwise known as the Open Web Application Security Project, and NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. All of which, even without PCI as a driving factor, are excellent references when developing and implementing an IT security program in your company. Under the PCI program, the compliance standards for merchants are ranked based on the number of credit card transactions each merchant processes per year. The ranking scale is 4 through 1, with 4 being the lowest level. Level 4 merchants are retailers who process less than 20,000 e-commerce transactions per year, and whose other transactions all combined are less than 1 million per year. Level 3 merchants process between 20,000 to 1 million credit card transactions per year. Level 2 merchants process between 1 million to 6 million credit card transactions per year. Level 1 merchants are retailers who process more than 6 million credit card transactions per year, or who have had a data breach, or an attack that resulted in an account data compromise, or who have been identified as a Level 1 merchant by a member of the Credit Card Association. And there you have it. PCI in a nutshell. In summation, there are 4 different levels which apply to different credit card transaction volumes. You may be thinking, so what? What is the big deal with these different merchant levels? It turns out, it actually makes a great deal of difference. We will start with the basic Visa, MasterCard validation requirements for merchant level 4. The first high-level requirement is an annual self-assessment questionnaire, which is referenced by its abbreviation throughout PCI documentation as the SAQ. The next high-level requirement is a quarterly network scan by an ASV, otherwise known as a PCI Council-approved scanning vendor. And the last, but also the most important high-level requirement is the attestation of compliance form. All of these minimum requirements are standard across all merchant levels, but there are differences. In the case of the merchant level 4 attestation compliance form, the compliance validation requirements are set by the acquirer, which is another way of saying the retailer. That means this level is an honor system. You may be wondering what's the point for level 4 merchants. The reality is this. Merchant level 4 retailers are definitely cybercrime targets, but not the way bigger retailers are. Breaking into a network, small or large, is a risky proposition that takes a lot of effort and it is not cheap. So the payoff for cybercrime has to be big enough to justify not only the effort, but the risk. If cybercriminals can steal your customer data easily, they will. But the more difficult it is, the less the effort and risk are worth. Believe it or not, just like regular business operations, cybercrime has to have a return on investment too. Next, are merchant level 3 retailers, who process between 20,000 to 1 million transactions per year. Who unfortunately for retailers at this level, are definitely juicer targets for cybercriminals. The Visa and MasterCard validation requirements for level 3 are the same as level 4 with one notable exception. The compliance validation requirements are not set by the retailer. As will be seen shortly, the higher the credit card transaction volumes are, the stricter the validation requirements become. The reason for this is simple. The greater the potential payoff, the more interesting an organization becomes to cybercriminals. Which brings us to the level 2 requirements. These are the same basic requirements as level 3. The annual self-assessment questionnaire. The quarterly network scan, by a PCI-approved scanning vendor. And of course, the attestation of compliance form. However, as one might have guessed, the actual requirements for level 2 are more intensive than level 3, and for all intent can be considered the same as level 1. Again with one notable exception. Moving on to merchant level 1. The difference is a document known as the Annual Report on Compliance, also referred to as the ROC. This on-site assessment is performed by an independent PCI-approved Qualified Security Assessor, or QSA, or an internal auditor, if the assessment is signed by an officer of the company upon completion. And you might be wondering what this really means. As mentioned earlier, level 1 is the same as level 2, except that independent parties are confirming requirement compliance and submitting official reports on how well your organization adheres to PCI compliance standards. Which brings us to the standards. There are 12 high-level requirements that constitute the body of PCI compliance standards, which translate into roughly 330 direct controls that cover, but are not limited to the following. Requirements 1 and 2, building and maintaining secure networks and systems. First, through the use of firewalls to protect data. And second, by not using vendor-supplied defaults. Requirements 3 and 4, the protection of cardholder data. 3. Through the practice of storing cardholder data in a protected environment. And 4. The practice of encrypting the transmission of cardholder data. Requirements 5 and 6, maintaining a vulnerability management program, by 5. The use of regularly updated antivirus software to protect against malware. And 6. By maintaining secure systems. Requirements 7, 8, and 9, the implementation of strong access control measures by 7. Restricting access to cardholder data. 8. The use of identity authentication to control access to your systems. And 9. The restriction of physical access to systems storing, or transmitting cardholder data. Requirements 10 and 11, regularly monitoring and testing networks by 10. Tracking and monitoring all access to network resources and cardholder data. And 11. Regularly testing the security of your systems and processes. And last, Requirement 12, maintaining an information security policy that addresses the information security needs for all personnel. This is the point where most business managers will state, "That's nice. But what the heck does it really mean?" So far, these requirements are beginning to sound expensive. And their observations are likely correct. Although, just as a reminder, the cost of meeting the PCI requirements is a fraction of what Target ended up paying, following their breach. That said, however, the question, what does it really mean, is still valid. So, let us return to something outlined during the agenda review. Remember this list? Let us start with the second bullet, data classification and protection, which of course falls under what your IT retail teams can do. A key component to modern electronic payment processing is the encryption of credit card data, almost as quickly as the credit card is scanned. The encrypted credit card data is then sent to bank servicing the credit card. After the bank, or payment service provider, receives and authorizes your credit card transaction, a token is sent back to the store's network. The encryption process is there to ensure greedy cybercriminals do not intercept any unprotected transmission with your credit card information. This brings us to the next security control. The storage of credit card data. The rules for retailer storage of credit card data are simple. First, no unencrypted or untokenized credit card numbers are to be kept on retailer systems or databases. Next, only tokens may be kept by the retailer's systems. This is the point in the process where the retailer keeps the token that was returned by the bank, on file as a record of your payment, instead of your credit card number. And last, retailers are never to store sensitive card authentication data, like personal identification numbers, or magnetic strip data. This way, if a retailer's network is ever compromised, cybercriminals cannot steal your credit card data. All of this sounds simple enough. However, do not forget a key part of protecting credit card data is the Internet. Websites that accept credit card payments must be configured as HTTPS. Same as the store credit card scanners, credit card information that is received over the Internet needs to be encrypted before transmission to the bank, also known as the solution provider. Of course, the banks will send tokens back to the retailer as a means of confirming the payment transaction. As discussed earlier, only the tokens should be stored by the retailer. An additional concern with retailer websites are what internal employees might do from inside the company. Consequently, access from inside the retailer's network to known malware sites should automatically be blocked. And because no system is perfect, the network and employee computers and devices should be scanned. This is in addition to the usual virus and malware scanning. Included in the efforts of IT retail departments to protect retail customers are the network access controls, the intrusion detection and prevention systems, the change control and data management processes, strict management of technological inventories, as well as managing the processes and techniques utilized to support IT security. This also means enforcing simple practices, such as not allowing development teams to deploy any untested software or applications onto a retailer's network. However, good as this sounds, it is not enough. Technology can only go so far. Retailer IT teams need help from the rest of the company. As mentioned earlier, this list represents just a few of the topics we will discuss. Where some very basic rules can make all the difference in the world, when it comes to protecting your information security, in addition to the technology applied by your local IT teams. That said, before we begin the next video, there is a key concept you will need to know. It is important. Throughout this video series, you will hear the term, Cardholder Data Environment, also referred to as the CDE. Of course, you might be wondering what Cardholder Data Environment really means. We are so glad you have asked that question. The Cardholder Data Environment includes any system, application, process, or personnel who are part of the credit card payment path. This applies specifically to any part of the network that credit card data passes through, whether it is encrypted or not, and all personnel who have access to that data. The first example are stores, especially store registers and credit card scanners. Another example are call centers, where customers call in to provide their credit card information over the phone. Or exchange and return departments, where customers frequently provide their credit card information, in order to get their money back. And of course, if you are paying installments on that brand new piece of merchandise, the accounts receivable department inside the finance division of the company who provided the loan. Included with each of these groups where store and finance personnel have access to customer data, are IT production support teams, who are charged with maintaining store registers, and call center computers, as well as IT administrators who are responsible for maintaining store servers, networks, and data centers. In other words, anyone who might see or have access to cardholder data, including all systems that cardholder data travels through or is stored inside of. And on that note, we are at the end of our introduction to IT security and PCI compliance. As a quick review, we discussed the overall objectives of not only this video, but this entire series. We provided easily verifiable historical background on the year 2014 and the rash of successful cyber attacks, covering the Home Depot and Target attacks. We briefly reviewed some of the objectives of attackers and the tools they employ. We reviewed the impact of cyber attacks on retail customers and retailers. We reviewed some of the processes used by IT retail teams to protect retail customers, employees, and the public in general. During the introduction to PCI compliance, we reviewed the 4 different merchant levels, the 12 high-level requirements needed to meet PCI security standards. We provided a high-level introduction into the practice of data protection. And last, but not least, we outlined the concept of the cardholder data environment. With this knowledge, you are now ready to begin the next video. That is all for this video. Next time, we will begin with acceptable use, outlining what this means, and how to apply it to your organization. This video was made possible through the contributions of many people and their respective teams, both direct and indirect. Especially the online news teams covering IT security during the years 2013 and 2014. We cannot adequately express the importance of their contributions to everyone's safety, not only on the internet, but throughout the retail world. Thanks also go out to the men and women who are the unsung heroes of the internet, with the Open Web Application Project, otherwise known as OWASP, the SENS Institute, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and of course the PCI Security Standards Council. Again, thank you everyone for your time, efforts, contributions, and due diligence. Respectfully, your concerned IT security coworkers of the world.